Hey, somebody's been really concerned about my feelings on their art over the last couple of days. I'm going to be honest with you. With what has happened in the last 10 to 15 years, I don't really have much of a sense of aesthetic appreciation. Somebody bifurcated my brain at some point in time and took my left brain and dumped all kinds of toxic, horrible stuff in it. And for years, when I tried to tap into other parts of my brain, including the more visual and the more creative aspects, I found a horror show of things that somebody else was running over there and speculating on or warehousing for whatever they thought they were entitled to do. I'm okay with what I got right now. I can deal with it. But here's the thing, art. At one point in time, I was a stagehand for a group of artists. And among the things that happened while I was a stagehand was a production that discussed the history of institutionalization of people alleged to be mentally ill in this country. Now, I've said this elsewhere, both on audio files as well as video, that the history of alleged mental illness in this country is absolutely one of the most disgraceful things. I think a lot of it has to do mostly with religious persecution, including persecution of people that have special gifts, and also with a refusal to deal authentically with the history of slavery in this country, including what now is emerging to be something that is incapable of being kept confidential any longer, which is that there are men in this country that literally understand their daughters to be their property. And they actually, literally, sell their daughters to other men so that other men acquire property in the form of a wife. And they've been repeating this on and on. And as a matter of fact, it seems that this is really part of the underpinning of the USMCA. So don't make any pretenses right now, if you're in the military, that you don't understand what happened. You kept your mouth shut for too long and you took orders from the wrong people when you shouldn't have. And you probably have trauma, and now they want to say what? You have some sort of mental illness? I just found a notice that discussed a $1.7 billion appropriation for construction of a dry dock in Maine. My understanding is that it is supposed to be a dry dock for submarines, including specific classes of submarines. Now, I know a little bit about those boarding school games that certain people who at some point in time get some cover from their State Department connections and their little submarine games, including as part of their election campaigns, by the way. And including in manners that allow for men to think that they're going to be able to get away with what happened with NAFTA, right? The whole take a hit for a while, sell your daughters for a while, and when it's time for you to retire, we'll have something for you, right? Which is exactly the phase we're at right now. Well, the day that that was announced and made publicly announced was the 10th anniversary, apparently, of a notice regarding psychotropics. How many of us were just decided, well, if we kind of put her on ice, let's warehouse her for a couple of years and let's run an inventory on her human capital that we can use as collateral to loan her out. And depending on how high functioning she is, we may or may not be able to hook up a couple different accounts to her, right? But at the end of that term, well, we're going to have to give her a performance evaluation. Ultimately, we're going to have to find something wrong with her. Personality. She's not very service oriented, right? She didn't convey on command with the frequency in order to maintain the production quotas we established years ago without her informed consent, right? Where's the other thing? I've been drug free for over 5 years. And that kind of takes me out of contention personally as a submarine, right? And this is a big problem we have, is that a lot of people, women and men, have been mischaracterized as having some sort of mental illness while they've actually been targeted with electronic warfare in order to try to torture them to the point where they go and seek medical treatment. And ultimately, that medical treatment was completely fraudulent, starting with the diagnosis. But if you can convince her to submit. And you can go ahead and subordinate bond her and then try to farm her out for a while, right? Problem is, now we're at that point in time where you got to figure out how to put her to rest, right? Her mission's done. Regardless of whether or not she performed up to whatever it was that your expectations were. Well, this country's always had a big problem with decommissioning, right? End of life care, retirement, appropriate compensation after having a work record based on actual service, including service you consensually engaged with informed consent, with an expectation that after a certain amount of time you would be acknowledged for your work, and perhaps be in a position where you could allow for your expertise to be passed on to somebody else in your legacy. Some of these things got misidentified along the way. We're in a very precarious situation right now. We cannot afford as a society to have any fucking tolerance for drug dealers moonlighting as if they're statespeople. We just spent 20 years completely blowing it in Afghanistan. This was completely premeditated. Why? Because every chance you had to listen to competent, capable leadership in your own country that just did not make a priority out of normalizing narco-terror instead of actual public policy implementation or public service, you just refused. You refused to acknowledge you had leadership that exists. And now we're back to square one with the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. You know what this just told 20 years of women who went to college and got a degree and then were told, rather than it being a capital outlay as part of an appropriations process that they could contribute to as actual women in leadership, that it was some sort of debt that daddy and his broker friends got to swap in and out with other daddies and their broker friends in other parts of the world? Sorry. We didn't have enough time for you. And we can't have you speaking too loudly because we've got another generation of young people that are a lot cuter than you and don't have that mouth you have. And because of the standard of living we're in right now, well, we're going to have to make sure that they don't make the same mistakes you did. Right? Bullshit. Bullshit. If you are on psychotropics, get off of them. Throw them the fuck out. They are your worst fucking enemy right now. Stop it with this COVID-19 crap. We cannot afford any more of our time and our people being brokered like we are nothing more than sterile mules for a bunch of predators that never controlled their appetites.